All right, sorry about that. I thought my computer died with the screensaver, so we're going to do just a brief third video real quick. So Chester Arthur became president, and he actually didn't act much like a stalwart. People, he actually got a lot more accomplished than people thought he would. The most famous thing that he accomplished while he was president is called the Pendleton Civil Service Act, which you need to be aware of. So one thing that the half-breeds actually wanted to do was stop the patronage and make it not so abusive. And so half-breeds like Garfield promoted this idea of changing how we give jobs out in the government. And so when Arthur became president, people thought like he wasn't going to do the thing that Garfield had been trying to accomplish. And so Arthur surprisingly picks up this mantle of trying to get civil service reform accomplished to get rid of patronage type activity. So what the Civil Service Act does is require certain government jobs you have to take a test for. So basically you have to prove that you're competent and know how the job operates. So there was it's like 9 or 10% of the government jobs under this act now require you to take a test to show that you're competent to get the job. And once you have the job, you can't be fired just because you're a Democrat and your new boss is a Republican, or vice versa. So the Civil Service Act not only makes it to where you have to take a test to get the job, but you also are now protected by the government from getting fired. So at first it was only a handful of jobs, but over time it expanded to be more and more, and where now all government jobs, national, state, and so forth, if you work for the government and you're not elected, you're protected under the law to where you can't get fired just because you're not the same party as the new politicians in charge. So that's a big change. So this is going to go a long way to start limiting patronage. Not a lot at first, but over time it's going to get empowered to take away more of the patronage problems. And civil service, like being government, like you serve the government, right? Like you work for the government, civil servants, that's what they're talking about there. Also, Arthur approved the development of a more modern Navy, so he also helped to develop more modern Navy ships. While being president, even though Republicans had high tariffs, he questioned if they were good for the economy. So he didn't change them, but he did question if having high tariffs was the best solution. And so because of some of the things he didn't really act the way they wanted him to, he was not nominated again for president. So you'll have a new election in 1884. So this is where we're going to do the 1884 election, then we'll stop there basically, or the next guy I should say, and stop there. So Grover Cleveland is going to run as a Democrat in 1884. The Republicans nominated James Blaine, who we talked about earlier, but even Republicans worried about Blaine's honesty because he was so notorious for all his different patronage type stuff. So Cleveland won. He was a Northern Democrat, so you still don't have a Southerner in the presidency yet. He's a Northern Democrat who was very honest, frugal, conscious, and uncompromising. So Cleveland was very honest, frugal, conscious, and uncompromising. He was also governor of New York at the time. So he's probably one of our most conservative presidents ever, and was very tight with the money in general. He won in a very dirty election. Like there was a lot of mudslinging, name-calling in this election. But he's the first Democrat to win the presidency by election since Buchanan, before the Civil War. So he believed in a more frugal and limited government. Like Jefferson had wanted a long time ago. So he wanted to rein in some of the things the government did and spending that the government did. He did expand civil service protection, and he vetoed hundreds of pension bills for false Civil War veterans. So there was a lot of so-called Civil War veterans petitioning to get pensions or money from the government, and so he basically nips that in the bud and cancels a lot of the pensions for a lot of false veterans who are trying to get money from the government, which shows how he's frugal. He also famously signed the Interstate Commerce Act in 1887 and the Dawes Severalty Act in 1887 as well, both of which we talked about. So he also signed into law Interstate Commerce Act and the Dawes Act. Under him, the government also got some 81 million acres of land from ranchers and railways too. The government also got 81 million acres of land from ranchers and railway companies that didn't work out. Okay, so we're going to stop there with Grover Cleveland. This is Grover Cleveland right here with the mustache. Grover Cleveland's going to serve one term. He's not going to win his next term, but he will come back later on and serve a second term, just non-consecutive. So we're going to stop there with Grover Cleveland, and I'll see you on Monday. Have a good weekend.